Hey everybody, welcome back. In the last couple of videos, we went over the VDS on its own, the NVDS on its own. In this video, we're gonna kind of bring everything together. We're gonna talk about dropping NSX in a brownfield environment, but we're gonna really laser focus on the NVDS versus VDS design decision and kind of why you would go one way or the other. So let's get to it. So first, we're gonna talk about the NVDS option. In this case, we're looking at one vSphere host. We have vSphere host A, and we've got an existing VDS here. This VDS has two physical uplinks. We have VMNIC 0 and VMNIC 1, and we have VMNICs 2 and 3 are completely unused currently. Now, I know some of you are probably saying, like, more than likely, people are using those two uplinks for this VDS. So we would have all four uplinks on the VDS. And that's perfectly fine. You can do that. But the thing is, when we drop the NVDS on this host, as I showed you how to configure in the last video, we're going to have to give it uplinks. So it doesn't matter where those uplinks come from. We can take them away from the VDS. We can have them be unused uplinks that are now assigned to the NVDS. Whatever the case is, we just need uplinks for the NVDS. And as I mentioned previously, when we configure any port groups in NSX, those will be pushed down. In this case, they'll be pushed down to the NVDS, and now we can connect VMs to that port group. And that port group will just show up in vCenter like a regular port group, no different than this distributed port group here. Now, the reason I show this design is because a lot of people say, I want to install NSX, but I don't want to just flip a switch and suddenly, boom, I'm on NSX. This is exactly how you don't do that. If you have a VDS here, you drop an NVDS in here, they each have their own uplinks, then no big deal. You can just connect your VM to whatever port group you want it to be on. So when you're ready for that VM to migrate from non-NSX VDS to the NVDS, you just go right-click on the VM, edit settings, reassign it to the new port group, and you're done. Now that said, as far as kind of pros and cons of going with this design, one of the pros of going with the NVDS option is that it supports older vSphere versions. So if you're on anything older than 7.0, then NVDS is your only option if you're doing NSXT. You have no other choice, but you will be doing an NVDS. I will say the NVDS itself is going away, and VMware actually released a migration tool in 3.1, which I'll be doing a video on showing you guys what that migration looks like. But regardless, you're going to have to go NVDS if you're on older than vSphere 7.0. Now, as far as downsides, I've been talking about this quite a bit. The biggest downside to me is that you have to reallocate some uplinks. You have to find uplinks, either buy some new ones, take them away from a VDS, whatever the case is, you need uplinks for this NVDS, which is not always ideal. Finally, one of the other drawbacks in my opinion is that this NVDS is completely managed from NSX. Now, creating port groups or segments in NSX is super easy. But what is not so easy is having to say, okay, well, I have to manage this VDS in vCenter, but if I want to do, say, maybe I want to enable LLDP. Well, in vCenter, I can go do that here. In NSX, I have to go into NSX and change it for this NVDS. So it's really nice when you can do all of this under one umbrella, which will be the next option that we're about to talk about. So let's take a look at this VDS option. This is referred to as the Converge VDS option. So you walk into an environment, you say, Mike, help us get NSX up and running. We're on vSphere 7.0 or newer. What can we do? Well, my answer in that case is we're going to go set up the VDS option when we prep your host. And by doing that, basically, we're going to push NSX segments directly to that VDS. So in other words, they're going to show up as regular port groups, just like your other port groups. The only difference in this case, they'll have little N's next to them showing that they're NSX port groups. The beauty here is clearly, I didn't have to re-architect my uplinks. I didn't have to take some away or install new hardware or anything like that. I was able to use that existing VDS, which is really nice. From a functional standpoint, you're not losing anything with NSX. Whether you go NVDS or VDS, it's all the same to NSX. It's not like one or the other is going to leave you in a bad position. You can definitely go either way without any issues. It really comes down to, in my opinion, it's more of an installation headache of which way do I go? Do I want to steal uplinks or not? And what version of vSphere am I on? Things like that. Once you get past those decisions, it gets pretty easy to figure out which way you should go. So that said, let's talk about those pros and cons. Obviously, the not having to mess with your uplinks, we've talked about that quite a bit. That's great. Being able to manage this VDS entirely in vCenter is really awesome. So even though NSX is kind of sitting on top of this VDS, we can still go create new distributed port groups. We can do everything to this VDS we wanted to previously, even with NSX here. And then just adding to that, I think this option is just much less intrusive in general since we're not changing those uplinks or anything like that. And we keep our operational consistency and being able to manage the VDS in one place. As far as drawbacks, the only drawback I can really think of to this model is really right here. You have to be on vSphere 7.0. Specifically, you have to be on VDS version 7.0 or newer. If you're not, for any reason, you can't do this option, and you should be looking at the NVDS option back here, right there. That would be your model if you're not on vSphere 7.0. Now, all of that said, I know that was a whole lot to throw at you. I want to add one thing to all of this. This decision is ultimately on a per host basis, as you saw in the last video where I set up NVDS on one host. So you can do a VDS on this host and NVDS on this host and so on, or you can standardize, which is what I would recommend if you can. So you don't have to get in the mindset of, do I go this way and I'm stuck with only this, or do I go this way? Now, of course, the future here is the converged VDS option. That's definitely the way you want to go if you can, but if you can't, don't sweat the NVDS option as well. So hopefully you guys found this video helpful. In the next video, I'm actually going to show you how to migrate from an NVDS into a VDS using NSXT Manager directly. So I'll see you there.